thought I'd do this morning is just take a few minutes and just talk about my path, real simply. John Harker is my across the street next door neighbor. John and Roger asked me to talk about, well, John said, you know, you ought to talk about your nonprofit work because it's been such a big part of my career and a big part of our success. So I thought I'd share my original goals when I started in business, how those goals have changed, why they've changed, that aha moment in my life, what they've evolved into and where they are now. My original goals when I started in the life insurance business. I was one of those obnoxious guys that called you on the phone at dinner time. And I got into that business because they told me, you know, you have unlimited potential. You can do something. You can really make a mark in this business. And I love to work. I mean, it was 70, 80 hours a week, six days a week minimum, and it wasn't uncommon for me to work Sundays too. And I'm sure that there are some of you in this room that can identify with that. But the ability to make my mark on my state really was the enticement. Social net worth, networking in the nonprofit community, relationship sales. I didn't even understand how any of that worked. It was just call. Be obnoxious, be obnoxious, be obnoxious. Set 15 to 40 appointments a week and go. About probably my second year in the business, a fellow named Mason DeNeff called on me. And that's an old familiar name, isn't it, Jim? Yeah, great guy. And he was soliciting memberships for the Portland Chamber of Commerce. He said, you ought to join the Portland Chamber of Commerce. It's business leaders, I said, okay, that sounds great. He then recruited me onto the membership committee for the Chamber of Commerce and convinced me that what I really ought to do is I ought to go out and call on all of you and convince you to join the Chamber of Commerce, which I did. And I continued to do it. They had a deal where if you convinced 100 businesses to join the Chamber of Commerce, you became a lifetime member of the Chamber of Commerce, a Silver Card Club member. Well, after 2 or 3 years, I joined Mason and I've got my little silver card. Along that way, I made no connection between that relationship with you and the Chamber and you and me. It didn't fall into my sales at all. It was lost on me. A year or two later, and about this time, I left the big insurance company and started my own little company, Kerr Insurance. A client said, you know, you should join Rotary. And he took me to a downtown Portland Rotary meeting. And at that time, Portland Rotary was the 5th largest club in the world out of 30-some-odd thousand clubs. It's 725 members. It was the who's who place in Portland. And I was absolutely thrilled just to go to lunch there. And I was able to join. And in joining, I made a rule for myself that I wouldn't, for the first 5 years, I wouldn't ask anybody or call on anybody about what I was selling. I was going to truly try to use this as a way to give back to the community. I really respected people, like most of you, who commit a chunk of their life to making the community better. So I wanted to be like you. So 5 years. You can imagine an insurance guy going 5 years without asking anybody to buy their product. It was interesting. In that 5 years, I jumped into the committees that seemed to need people. The greeter committee is the person like that good-looking young lady that was here greeting all of you this morning. And it was, hi, welcome to Rotary. Hi, welcome to Rotary. I volunteered every Tuesday. Hi, welcome to Rotary. Hi. And the activities committee. My wife and I are both pretty good at social things, at getting kind of, you know, we're the person that says, this is a great thing, kind of like Tom Sawyer, you know, get a lot of our friends to paint fences. So I was on the podium a lot, talking about doing this and doing that, all these social things that we were doing in Rotary. Well, after about, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years of this, maybe 6 years of this, Jim Rippey was the board member that I reported to. Jim was one of the founders of Columbia Management, Columbia Funds. If any of you still remember, it was a fabulous financial organization here in town. He's a great, great guy. And I'm sitting next to him at lunch one day, and he says, well, Bruce, you've done a good job, so I'm going to nominate you for the board of directors. And I said, well, that sounds great. He says, well, no, just relax because you never get in the first time. But what he didn't account for was all the times I'd been on that podium. And it's, you know, these nonprofit deals, there's much a social thing as anything else. I mean, it's, if you see faces a lot, okay, well, I'll vote for him. I got elected. And that was, I mean, that was really my MBA. Sitting at a table once a month at a board meeting with the CEO of Regents, the CEO of Standard Insurance, the CEO of the Northwest Natural Gas Company, of Burns Brothers, et cetera, and watching those gentlemen make decisions, their thought process was awesome. It was just an awesome experience. It taught me that you don't necessarily need to go the traditional business route to gain experience about people. The nonprofit route, or through your church, or through your community action, or your neighborhood association, you can, through osmosis, learn how other people make decisions and use some of that information. And it worked well for me. I later became president of Downtown Rotary, which was just, for Renee and I, was just an awesome experience. And that led me to, not necessarily being president, but being in Rotary introduced me to Dante. Because one of the things that we did, and it's unfortunate we don't do it anymore, but one of the things we did in that club was we did a mentorship program for at-risk youth. And what we would do is we'd assign two folks, you and me. We would take one kid starting in the 6th grade, and we agreed that we'd spend an hour with that child, an hour or more, every other week, so that he got you one week, me the next, you the next week, so back and forth, it's constant contact, not heavy-duty contact or anything. And it wasn't the intention of buying them anything, taking them to Blazer games. It was just do what you normally do, give them the experience of you. And so Steve Hopkins and I became mentors for Dante in the 6th grade. Young African-American kid, great kid, personality just pouring out of everywhere. And he was very fortunate. His mother was a flake, but he had a wonderful grandmother and grandfather, and they took really good care of him. So things went along great in grade school, and then about the time Dante hit high school, he hit high school socially in 4-wheel drive. That kid was in everything, everywhere, girlfriends, dances. He was having the time, he was having way too good a time. And his grades suffered as a result of that. So up until that point, Steve and I had been just kind of his like big brothers. So we got him aside one Friday afternoon, called him into my office, said, Dante, it's time for us to, you know, kind of call you on the carpet here a little bit. Your grades are terrible. He was getting D's and F's in science and math. So he said, well, he was, as we were trying to put the pressure on him, he was being a teenager, and he's like, hey, what do you think you're going to do with me? You can't do anything, kind of. And we said, oh, yeah, we can. Oh, no, you can't. I said, oh, yeah, we can. I said, I'm going to become your worst nightmare. I'm going to be the 40-year-old bald guy in a bow tie sitting in class with you every day. And he said, you can't do that. Well, what he didn't know is the superintendent of schools, this must have been my year as president, because the superintendent of schools had been the speaker at Rotary 2 weeks prior, and I'd met him, spent some time with him, had a first name basis with him. I mean, not a great relationship, but I knew how to call the guy. And I said, well, I know the superintendent of schools. I think we can go to school with you. Well, we'll see about that. Well, the long and short of it is, Steve agreed to go to the afternoon science class, and I went to the morning algebra class. And we said, we're going to go to school with you every day until your grades come up and you make up the 3 weeks of back assignments that you haven't done. He said, well, we'll see about that. I said, I'll see you Monday morning. So Monday morning shows up. I go to Madison High School. Isn't that the one on 82nd? Southeast? Yeah. And I go to the front door, and there's Dante. And he said, well, let me show you my school. He takes me in down the hall, introduced me to the teacher. We sit down, we're in class, and I'm thinking, this kid is enjoying this. I'm in trouble. I'm going to spend every morning for the rest of my life in this class with him. The next day comes along, he's not at the front door, but he is at the door of the class. And he greets me at the door of the class, brings me in, sits me down. I'm like, this isn't looking good. The third day, he's not at the door of the school, he's not at the door of the class, he's sitting in his seat. I go in, I just dress like this, I go in, I sit down behind him, and I don't say a word. Just, if kids greeted me, I said something. And just before the bell rings, this tall, good-looking African-American girl comes in the door. And you could just tell every boy in that class had a crush on this girl, and especially Dante, because he's like this, like, she comes in, she jazzes with this kid and that kid, and comes up to me and goes, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Bruce Kerr." Didn't say anything else. Oh. She walks up, smacks Dante in the back, says, "He your mentor?" Then Dante says, "No." And I thought, bam, I got him. He had all his homework in within 4 days. 3 weeks of homework. His grades came up to a B. Made all the difference in the world. It was great, and Dante, he's not very tough, but he still cuts, he's a barber now. He cuts my hair. He works over at Geneva's, has a fabulous practice. Anybody ever needs, he does a lot better job than this, if any of you need a haircut. He's a great guy, and that along with the fact that as a junior in high school, he fathered a child, it's been a very interesting relationship for me. One of the things that it taught me, though, was it burst my bubble a little bit, because I thought, you go out, the harder you work, the more you're going to change things. You can just change the world by effort. And what it taught me was, I'm only going to change Dante so much. He's not my child. It's not my genetics. I can only have so much impact. So all that said, though, fabulous experience. And if you ever get the chance to do something like that, I would encourage you to do it. Along the way, though, working with Dante, working with Rotary, working with the Chamber, working with other nonprofits, what I realized is that I really liked working with people who were involved in the community. It became almost like a filter for our business, in our marketing. And so I focused even more on that. So I got to tell you about an evening about 12 years ago, because our life really changed right around that time. We lived up here in Hillsdale, and used to go down to the Mac Club because it was only like 8 or 10 minutes away, and we'd go down there and work out a couple times a week. And on Friday nights, my wife Renee and I had this routine where we'd go there and work out. She'd work out, I'd work out, and then we'd meet back in the men's bar. She'd have a glass of wine, I'd have a beer. And then we'd pack up and grab the kids out of Little Mac's and head home. We had 2 children at that time, Turner and Nellie Kay. The perfect household. The boy was the first child, and the girl. And she'd been talking about, I was 48 or 49 years old, and thinking, we don't need, I don't want any more kids. I'm old enough. She was 30 or 42 at the time, 43, something like that. So this one Friday night, we're sitting there, and I'm drinking my beer, and she's not touching her wine. Usually she's like, wham, drinks that little glass of wine they give you, and then orders a second one and drinks a little bit of that. Not touching it. Like, what's with you? Nothing, I'm fine. But she's kind of shucking it. You guys know where I'm going with this. So I'm like, what's wrong? Come on, just tell me. No, everything's fine. Finally, I said, well, just tell me. She reaches in her pocket, pulls out this little plastic thing and throws it down and says, you better go buy that Suburban. Well, it was the little pregnancy deal. We're going to have another kid. So I thought that at that time I would be a not very happy camper, but I had a smile on my face I couldn't get off. And all I could say was, no way. And all she could say was, way. No way. Way. No way. Way. And it was a very different response out of me than I anticipated. Well, that sent us on a search for a new home, because this little house we had up in Hillsdale was on a lot that was like this. She'd been after me to get a house with a flat lot. So we looked around and we looked around. We found the perfect house just out south of Lake Oswego. Beautiful view of Mount Hood, an acre, flat lot. You just don't get that in Oregon very much, a view and a flat lot. So we negotiated and we secured this house. And I think it was in February of that year, we were set to move in the next day. And I got a call at work that afternoon, and Renee sounded pretty distressed. She said, honey, you need to come home. I said, okay. So I jump in the car and I head home. And I knew she'd been doing some testing around the child, she'd had a blood test that didn't turn out well, so she had to have an amniocentesis, and then the long and short of it is the results of the amniocentesis came back. And they said that our little boy was going to be born with Down syndrome. So it changed from way, no way, happy, 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 dream home, never thought of we'd ever get there, to my wife crying 24 hours a day, not knowing how to deal with this. And so marriages either get closer in these kinds of situations or they fall apart. Ours were like a rock. It got much, much closer. Closer than we thought we had a close relationship before that. Nothing compared to what it became. So the next day, we move into our house. I'm helping the movers move stuff in. My wife, pregnant, sitting in the kitchen in this new house, our dream house, bawling. And it continued like that for the next 6, 8 weeks. It kind of like our lives, it was kind of like, it's a bright sunny day out there, but there's a window shade pulled down over every single window. Every single window. That's what it felt like. And day by day, minute by minute, as we learned more, that little window shade went up. It didn't go all the way up. It just started going up. Now, those of you probably all have seen or met kids with Down syndrome or adults. The one thing that's kind of consistent about Down syndrome is low muscle tone. And a doc knows that a child's born with Down syndrome when they deliver them, because they feel kind of doughy. They don't feel, there isn't muscle tone there initially. So all through that pregnancy, I prayed every single day. 2 things. 1, God, heal my child. All of a sudden, I became a real believer that he could do something about that. And I said, if you can't heal my child, at least make him strong. Make him strong. Well, Eli was born. He was born with Down syndrome, but he's a rock. That kid is as strong, is like that, completely off the charts. He's so strong. He plays soccer with his regular 4th grade team now, and has every year. He plays basketball. He's in Cub Scouts, is this, that, and the other thing. Excuse me. I have a video. I was hoping that we could show PowerPoint here, because I have a great video of Eli. He plays on 2 soccer teams, actually. He plays with his regular 4th grade team, and he plays with what's called the Challenger team. The Challenger team are the other kids with disabilities as well. Well, he kind of is the last guy to get picked on the regular team, as you can imagine, because he's slower. He's strong, but he's slower. But on the Challenger team, he just smokes them. He steals the ball constantly. He scores constantly. It's like Eli. Well, I have this video of Eric DiStefano, who's one of the high school kids that helps coach, talking to Eli, saying, you know what, you need to sit out for a little while. You need to let some of the other kids score. And his reaction to that, well, it's hilarious. If you want to leave me your email address after the meeting, I'll send you a link to it. It's on YouTube. We've sent it all over the world. Cracks people up. Same thing happens in basketball, because at recess at Oak Creek School, he plays basketball with all his peers, and he's gotten to be, he dribbles the ball. He doesn't hit. I keep trying to get him to shoot like a regular kid. No, like he shoots like this. It's kind of like his golf. He still plays golf like he's a hockey player. He holds it down. But at any rate, he does the same thing in basketball. Steals the ball, shoots, steals the ball, shoots. So it's interesting. And it's interesting in basketball. Last Saturday was our last game, and he played against they play against 3rd grade girls. 3rd grade girls are good. They're good enough to be competition, but they're sensitive enough not to overbear on them. So Molly Folks, one of our neighbors, was on the team that was playing Eli, and her dad Dan was there. So I went over and sat next to Dan for a few minutes, and we were talking. Dan's son is the same age as Eli's big brother, Turner. He's a sophomore in high school. 2 years ago they found out that he had a brain tumor. And they operated, and they did radiation and chemo, and thought they had it whooped. And about 3 months ago, MRI showed that it had come back. And that's very aggressive, and it's kind of not a great situation. So I sat with Dan for a few minutes. Because in a way, Dan's in the same club we are. Things are different than he anticipated, significantly different. And he said a couple things that were interesting to me. One was that 2 years ago, when they first found out about Jimmy's cancer, he was at his house, and my wife and her girlfriend Kathy were walking by, and they started talking, and Dan just broke down and crying, as any father does in that kind of situation. I'd like to have a nickel for every gallon of tears that I've cried over my kid. But he said, you know, your wife said something to me that's never left me. He said, just remember, you have your son today. And he said that had such impact because it made me stop and look at what I have right now and be thankful for it. He says, you know what, this is the most horrible situation I could ever imagine a father going through, but I wouldn't give up the last 2 years for anything. So it's kind of like Dan and I have chapters in our book of life that some of you may never experience. You may never want to experience, but we wouldn't give those chapters up for anything, because they make they carve who you are. And my life with Eli, it's different. When I take Eli to Washington Square, I never take him to Washington Square. When I take Eli to wherever I take him, he's never going to be the perfect child. He's not like his big brother Turner, who's a varsity lacrosse player as a sophomore and plays soccer, or like his sister, Nellie Kay. But he is who he is. And what I've gained through that, he's changed my perspective as a person. He's made me so much more patient. I mean, you folks, you and I are a lot alike. Anybody that gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning and goes to a bar to listen to a speaker about something that you think might improve you or change your perspective, you're driven. You're the people that are the backbone of America. You are creating who we are as a country, okay? Patience may not be your #1 virtue, but I guarantee you it's become a greater virtue for me. And as a result of that, it's changed me to be a much, much better person. It's certainly made me more vulnerable. Just being able to stand in front of you and talk about this is something that before Eli was born, there's no way I'd let you that close to me. And as a result of that, it's like when Eli was born, my wife put a birth announcement in the Rotary newsletter. And she used it was a variation of a little story that was told by another mother about a trip to Holland. Has anybody ever heard of the trip to Holland story? She said, you know, I was planning it. You have? Yeah. I was planning a trip to Italy. I got the sunscreen, I got the Italian books, I got the menus, the maps, everything, the itinerary. Got on the airplane. When I got off the airplane, I was in Holland. It was completely different. It's not bad, but it's windmills and it's flowers and it's paths and it's bicycles. I didn't go for windmills, flowers, paths, and bicycles. I was going for Tuscany. It's different. So she put a variation of that in to announce Eli's birth. From the time that hit, for the next 60 days, maybe 90 days, we had a gift, flowers, personal visit. We had personal contact from somebody every single day, 7 days a week, many of which we never met before, have never met to this day, because people passed that out, and we had letters from all over the country. Phenomenal impact on our life. So, what did this do? It made me more patient, more vulnerable, slower to judge people, less willing to throw myself into a project. At that time, I was the head of a task force for Rotary to select our next large project. My year as president, we did the children's park in the Rose Garden. Many of you have seen the barrier-free park. Scared me to death, because in my year we had to raise $1.5 million. Thanks God I didn't have to do it. But so what was the president, Danny Rawlinson, said, go out and get a group of guys together and find our next large project, which we did. We selected the Children's Museum, moving them from Barber Boulevard up to the old OMSI site, turned into a multi-million-dollar fundraising campaign. And when I found out my child was going to be born with Down syndrome, I said, I'm sorry guys, I'm not heading this up. I have more responsibility than the Children's Museum. My responsibility is to my family, my child, my wife. So, and I shifted at that time, really shifted to away from me trying to do everything to leadership development. About that time, Jim Francisconi, the guy that ran for mayor of Portland, good guy, even though he's a plaintiff's attorney, good guy, didn't make it, but he was the head of parks at the time. He asked me to be part of a group to form the Portland Parks Foundation. There I met Joey Pope and David Fuchs, and they taught me the basics of board development, leadership development. And for whatever reason, I became good at it. About that same time, the Children's Museum, well, not that same time, because it was a couple years later. The Children's Museum had been, we'd moved, it must have been about 3 years later, but they'd moved into the new Children's Museum, and the Children's Museum was on real shaky ground financially. So I had agreed to help them with board development. I went to two of my close friends, my partner Rod, who really runs our company and is largely responsible for the success of our company, and my best golfing buddy Scott. Both very successful, both at that kind of at that point in their career where they were looking for something beyond just work to make their mark in the area. I asked them, do you want a way to change Oregon? Do you want a real challenge, a place to use your skills for the common good? It sounds pretty good, doesn't it? I said, I suspect you want a challenge, not just a board position, but a place that really is going to challenge you. And they said, yeah, they kind of took the hook. So they became the core of a new board and a new direction for the Children's Museum. Margot Folks, Dave Hawkins, there were a number of folks, but those two guys were the core. That Children's Museum, you probably didn't know this, but it had a huge deficit at the time. It had a bloated staff, had a very insignificant fundraising in relation to what they really needed. It was teetering on the edge financially. Changed over the next 3 years to clearly in the black. The largest attendance growth in the nation. And right now, it's, for the young professional, it's the hot board. It's the place to be. And it's largely a result of the actions of those two gentlemen. So along the way, my sales process changed. I was no longer, by the way, after 5 years in Rotary, if you were a member of Rotary, you heard from me, because I called on everybody. I found that through social networking, nonprofits, that opened doors for me that wouldn't otherwise be open, because it gave people the opportunity to see me and to see our company in a real non-threatening way. And as a result of that, a lot of our clients today came from that work. So what am I doing now? Now I'm helping, as Aaron said, helping DePaul Industries, which is just an awesome, how many people have heard of DePaul Industries? Yeah. 3,000 disabled people at work in profitable jobs, making, and this isn't a charity, 2% of their funding comes from donations. 98% comes from the profit of those jobs. They give people jobs. There's nothing better in this world that you can do than to give a person a job. Forget about donating money. Give them a job, let them create it for themselves. These guys are just masters at it. The only problem is they're good here in Oregon. It needs to be replicated in every state in the union. Insight. Insight is an organization that's designed to, or developed to, put college graduates with a disability to work. You'd think if you had whether you had a disability or not, if you were a college graduate, you'd have a great job. But the unemployment rate among disabled college graduates is about 80%. Insight does a good job of getting internships and getting them going. Boy Scouts. Boy Scouts, there's an organization that does fabulous, fabulous work in values and skills, et cetera, and kind of lost their way here in Oregon. Clearly back on track now. Down Syndrome Network Oregon, gee, I wonder why we're involved with that. That's my wife and her girlfriends founded that organization, and I'm currently president of the board. So we do leadership development, and probably making 100 times more impact I am right now today than I was when I was trying to do it myself. And I match people just like you with challenging positions. And by doing so, we're really changing the face of the Northwest. So getting back to that original goal, it's kind of like the story of the kid that wanted big biceps. We all, every guy in here when we were kids, well, I still want big biceps. I'm not doing anything to get them, but I still want them. You probably heard this story. He said, yeah, I really want big biceps. And his buddy said, well, you need to go talk to Mr. Smith out in the outskirts of town. So he did. He walked out there and he said, Mr. Smith, I want big biceps. Can you help me? Mr. Smith said, well, you know, I got to think about that, what the best way is. So while I'm thinking, why don't you go over there and chop some wood for me? So I went over and chopped wood. Got dark. Mr. Smith was still thinking. He says, well, I'm still thinking. Come back tomorrow. This went day after day after day after day after day. After a length of time, he says, you don't have any wood left, Mr. Smith. And he says, well, look at your biceps. Huh, they're here. So today, as Aaron said, we're a pretty successful organization. We're pretty fast growing. We're very, very proud of the fact that we're one of the 100 best places to work in Oregon, as voted by our own employees. 50 employees, yada, 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 yada. More successful than we ever dreamed. So let me close with my friend Kerry Timchuk, who passed this on to me. It was about Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was approached leaving church, and he said, well, what did you think of today's sermon? And Abraham Lincoln said, well, it was eloquent, it was moving, but he forgot the most important part. He said, well, what's that? He said, he forgot to ask us to do something great. So, what about you? There's a lot more for you to do out there today. What are you doing? I urge you to tithe with your money and your talent and to share your perspective, because it's very valuable. And doing so will change our world. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask Bruce before we break? Yes, Bob, good morning. Great. So just to repeat the question for everybody to hear, Bob was asking, you know, oftentimes with married couples who have children with Down syndrome, as Bruce mentioned, that often tends to cause couples to separate. Bob wanted to ask what, in this circumstance, allowed you two to become closer and remain connected through this difficult time?
Well, I don't think it's not listed. It's not limited to Down syndrome. I think it's pretty much any. Well, from the time we found out that Eli was going to be born with Down syndrome, we went through all the normal things that everybody does. I mean, we considered all options, and even though we were, I guess we fall. I hate labels, but I guess we fall into the pro-life, and I didn't know that I fell under the pro-life label. When we started really analyzing ourselves and our thoughts and our feelings, it's kind of like my wife said to me one day. She said, you know what, if God decides to give me a child, I'm not going to look at it and decide whether I'm going to keep it or not and give it back. So I thought, I guess I fall into that same category. But I think that just like what got us through that whole time was prayer. I mean, maybe you're not supposed to say that in Oregon in public, I guess, but it's true. That's what continues to get us through it. Every single night when I say my prayers, and I never did this as a young adult. I might have done it as a little guy, but probably about the time I was 16 or 17, I kind of said, church is for my mom. I'm out of there. And then as I started having kids of my own, I kind of went back. But every night I asked for God to give me patience. Because let me tell you something. There's nobody more persistent in this world than Eli Kerr. I'm a persistent guy. My mom, when I said I was going to go into the insurance business, she said something like, oh, nobody has persistence like the man who sells insurance, or something like. She had some little lingo like that. Nothing like Eli. Eli will he'll drive you down. So, but that's a good thing and a bad thing. Or I should say that's a bad thing and it's a good thing. It's more good than it's bad. So anyhow, that's. There you go.
So another question somebody like to ask? Back. Okay, well, thank you again, everybody.